villain.
What a last hand.
That's you. That's you.
Queen is good. This is what you deal me for last hand.
Same one?
All right, currently Wednesday afternoon at Parq Vancouver, waiting to play a session of Cash. I'm on the waiting list for both 1-3 and 2-5. I would like to play 2-5, but I am further down the list on that game just because they only have one table running. So, but we'll see how it goes. Today is either going to be a very short session so I can leave and just avoid the traffic heading home. But it all depends on how the games go. If the game's really good, I might stay a little bit longer, but yeah, let me just kind of get a shot at the... Alright, can't really get a good shot of the room, but yeah, see you guys at the tables. I do indeed get called for 1-3 first, so I head over and grab my seat. This hand, I pick up Jack Queen of Spades at under the gun +1. I open to $10, only the hijack and button calls. It's three-way into a flop of Queen 8-4 Rainbow. Awesome flop hitting top pair. I c-bet for $15, mainly targeting weaker pockets or 8x. If I do get resistance or raise though, it's actually not great for me out of position, and I might have to let it go, as Jack kicker is a little questionable in this spot. Not a lot of Queen X hands lose to mine, but none of that matters as everyone folds. This hand, I pick up pocket nines on the button. Middle position limps, low jack limps. The hijack raises to $8, very small sizing. The cutoff cold calls, and the action is on me. I contemplate my options here. I could definitely 3-bet to attack the dead money and or isolate, which would be pretty standard if we had deeper stacks. However, the aggressor has a pretty short stack. If I do 3-bet and induce a 4-bet jam, calling off with pocket nines is not that great. I decide to cold call and set mine, as I don't expect a lot of 3-bet squeezes at these stakes. Of course, the small blind 3-bet squeezes to $28, again a pretty small sizing. The hijack and the cutoff calls. Closing the action and with great odds to set mine, I call. It's 4-way into a flop of Ace Deuce 4 Rainbow. The small blind c-bets for $50. Everyone folds to me. I miss hitting my set on an ace high board and 3-bet pot. I just let this one go. This hand, I pick up King Deuce of Diamonds in the hijack position. There are two limpers before the action is on me. I decide to attack the dead money with a suited king. I raise it to $20. The cutoff and under the gun +1 both call. It's 3-way into a flop of Ace 7-6 with 2 diamonds. Under the gun +1 checks to me. Flopping the nut flush draw is pretty good here. Ace high board is also in my range as the aggressor. I decide to c-bet for $25. The cutoff calls and +1 folds. The turn is an offsuit 4, essentially a brick. I'm now out of position with king high. As played, the villain likely has an ace. Check calling to try and hit my draw is fine, I think, but that leaves very little ways for me to win this pot, basically only counting on hitting, as it's hard for me to bluff if I play passively earlier. It will also be hard for me to get paid if I do check call and hit, as my hand will be pretty obvious with that line. I do block ace king, and I think I can still credibly rep that hand. I decide to continue my aggression. I size up and bet $100. I think this sizing will put a lot of pressure on one pair hands, even ace X with like a medium kicker, as my sizing does appear to be setting up a river jam. The villain tanks for a bit and folds. This hand, I pick up ace jack at under the gun. I open to $10. Only the middle position calls. It's heads up into a flop of Ace Queen 9 Rainbow. Great flop for my range and my hand. Most of the time, this is a clear c-bet. For this particular spot though, being out of position, I decide to check to the villain. I should mention that so far this session, every hand that I've opened, I continued with a c-bet. So I think this is a pretty good spot to change gears and mix it up. There are a lot of Queen X hands in his pre-flop calling range, some 9X and some pocket pairs as well. For this board, I decide to underrep my hand and target those types of hands. One pair that loses to my top pair. And those types of hands are usually 2 streets of value at most. The plan is by starting with a check. If the villain checks back, I'll be betting out the turn and the river. If the villain bets, I'll be shifting to check calling mode. The villain bets $8. I call. The turn is the Ace of Hearts. Great turn card, not only because it improves my hand from top pair to trips, but because the hands I was targeting, like Queen X, might think that they're more likely to be good now with 2 pair, since I'm less likely to be holding an ace. I continue with my plan and check again. I'm not too worried about needing protection because my hand does block a lot of draws. I have 1 heart, blocking the backdoor flush draw, and the jack also blocks a lot of the straight draws. I'm very comfortable letting the villain keep the betting lead, as he might bet to either bluff or bet for value, thinking Queen X is good. He does bet again, this time for $20. I call. I don't check raise here because, as mentioned, I'm not worried about protection. I'm pretty much only targeting Queen X or bluffs now, and I'm not looking to blow him off either. The river is a complete break. Now I have a decision to make, to bet or to check. If he has Queen X or 9X, I think he will check back a lot here and be happy to go to showdown. So value betting for a crying call is the way to go. If he's bluffing, I do need to check to feed him the row, but I'll also have to count on him to be capable of triple barreling. Ultimately, I decide to target Queen X and 9X and go for a value bet. I bet quarter pot and make it $20. I go with this sizing for 2 reasons. One is to get an easy call from any hand with showdown value. Another function is going for the slight chance he might read me as block betting small to get the showdown and raising for the river bluff. Remember that my hand is under-repped by check calling all the ways so far. In the end though, the villain folds. This hand, I pick up pocket 8s at the cutoff. The middle position limps. The hijack raises to $17. In position, I decide to cold call to set mine. Everyone folds except for the limper, who also calls. It's 3-way into a flop of 9-4-3 with 2 hearts. Middle position checks. The hijack c-bets for $25. I don't hit the set I was looking for, but there is only 1 overcard to my pair against the aggressor, who's not only not likely to have 9X. I'm not going anywhere quite yet. I call. The middle position folds. The turn is a queen. The villain bets again, this time for $50. This is pretty strong for being out of position. My third pair is just a bit too dicey to continue here. I fold. This hand, I pick up King Queen under the gun. I open to $10. Only the button and big blind call. It's 3-way into a flop of King 9-6 with 2 clubs. The big blind checks to me. I c-bet for $15. The button folds and the big blind calls. The turn is a 7. The villain checks to me again. Now I'm thinking that my top pair is likely still good. One pair hands that beat me are Ace King and pocket aces, but there was no 3-bet pre-flop, so I'm counting those out. I decide to continue value betting and target weaker King X and some drawing hands. I am holding a club, so the flush draw is less likely, but some hands that can easily call the flop include hands like 9-10, 9-8, 7-8. All of these would now have a pair and straight draw. So I charge a full pot size bet and make it $60. The villain check raises to $150. At this point, my top pair is not looking too good. I don't see any bluffs in his spot at these stakes. He can easily have sets and maybe even hit a gut shot on the turn. I let this one go. This hand, I pick up 8-10 of hearts on the button, only the cutoff limps before the action is on me. I raise it up to $15 to isolate or pick up the dead money. The small blind and limper both call. It's three-way into a flop of Jack 8-6 with 2 spades. The small blind checks. The cutoff bets $10. This board doesn't really give me range advantage, and having second pair in a multi-way pot is not that great. But for a small bet and being in position with some backdoor straights, I call. The small blind also calls. The turn is the 5 of spades. This card brings in flushes and a straight, all of which I unblock. The action checks to me, and I happily check back. The river is an ace. Both villains check to me again. Now there's a card that benefits my range. I could check back as I do have some showdown value with the pair 8, but I just never thought that could be good enough to win. Seeing how the action played out, and now a great scare card hits the river, I decide to turn my third pair into a bluff. I bet $50. I'm mostly repping ace X and maybe even checking back with a strong hand on the turn, like a flush or straight to be fancy. That second scenario is kind of goofy, but as played, I'm just mainly reading that the two villains can't have the straight or flush at this point. After a bit of tanking, they both fold. My name gets called as a seat becomes available at 2-5. So this hand before being dealt, I announce that it's my last hand. I'm at under the gun +1, and I pick up pocket aces. Under the gun limps. I raise it to $15. Only the button and initial limper call. It's three-way into a flop of Queen Queen 7 rainbow. Under the gun checks to me. I decide to pot control on this board, as even with aces, I'm either way ahead or way behind here. I check. The button checks back. The turn is a 9. Under the gun bets $20. I call. The button folds. The river is a 3, essentially a brick. The villain now bets $35. This bet is so value heavy. At these stakes, you typically won't see players going for thin value. So my first thought is that I'm likely against Queen X here. But my hand is under repped, and what can I say? I'm just not good enough to let it go here.
That's you. That's you.
Queen is good. This is what you deal me for last hand.
Same one? Really?
That's what I had.
Same hand?
No. That went like my last hand. I never got those. I am now seated at 2-5. Unfortunately, this 2-5 session ends up being super short. I think about 1 hour. Before the game just breaks, I do manage to capture a couple interesting hands to share. And here we go. This hand, I pick up pocket 8s in the big blind. Everyone folds to the button, who opens to $20. The small blind folds. I think I can mix between calling and raising here. Out of position and early into the session, I decide to take the more passive route and call. It's heads up into a flop of 9-9-5 with 2 hearts. I check. The villain C bets for $20. Pretty good flop for pocket 8s against a late position open. I call. The turn is a 4 of hearts. I check again. The villain bets again, this time for $45. This card does complete a flush, but other than that, it doesn't change the strength of my hand. I think 9x is still not that likely based on his range and sizing. He could still be betting this turn with 2 overs and a heart or just the ace of hearts. I call again. The river is the king of hearts. I check yet again. The villain bets $100. Just a horrible river card. I was hoping to check call some rivers like a brick, board pairing card, any low card, etc. And the king of hearts is just not one of them. He may have backed into a high flush, and I might even lose to some bluffs. I let this one go. This hand, I pick up ace 10 on the button. Everyone folds to me, and I open to $15. The small blind 3 bets to $65. The big blind folds and the action is back on me. Just based on hand strength, ace 10 is not that great against a 3-bet, but this villain is a very solid regular, meaning he knows my opening range can be wide on the button, and he could just be attacking my raise based on that. So his 3-betting range, of course, has the really strong hands like aces, kings, ace, king, but can also consist of pure bluffs up to some hands that are slightly better than ace 10, but not super strong. The ace in my hand blocks some of the hands at the top of his range, namely aces and ace king. So I decide to utilize that and go for a 4-bet here. I make it $215. The villain goes in the tank. I'm a little more at ease now because it starts to look like he's a little annoyed and not thinking of going over the top. Calling a 4-bet out of position without a super premium is, after all, not the most comfortable spot to be in. In the end, he does find a fold. A few days later, I head back to Parq, hoping to play some 2-5 again, this time hopefully for a session longer than 1 hour. Fortunately, there is a seat available right away, so I sit down and start. This hand, I pick up King Queen at the cutoff. Under the gun opens to $20, plus 1 calls. The action folds to me. I'm getting good odds to play this pretty decent hand. If the open were from a later position, I could consider 3-bet squeezing. But against an early open and caller, I think calling with positional advantage is the better option. I call. The small blind, who is the loose wild card at the table, also joins in. It's 4-way into a flop of Jack 9-8 with 2 diamonds. Everyone checks. The turn is the king of diamonds. The small blind now bets out $75. Under the gun folds and plus 1 calls. The action is on me. I managed to turn top pair. As far as 1-pair hands go, I think I likely have the best one because based on the preflop action, ace king shouldn't be in here. The board is very connected though, with straight and flush possibilities. The small blind has been buying in short and pretty much playing like a loose cannon. So I'm actually most worried about under the gun plus 1's calling range here. There's not a lot of weaker king X's, only king 10, but there are some pair and straight draw type hands like 9-10 suited or Jack 10 pot controlling the flop, or even ace 10, or just ace X with the ace of diamonds. I decide to call and see if I can get the showdown. The river is an ace. Not a great card as ace of diamonds now beats me, but both villains check. I happily check back and table my hand. The small blind mucks. Plus 1 shows king 10, and I take this one down. This hand, I pick up pocket aces in the big blind. Under the gun plus 1, and the hijack limps. The button raises to $30. The small blind folds. Easy 3-bet here. I make it $150. Only plus 1 calls. It's heads up into a flop of king 9-6 with 2 spades. The villain is a loose cannon. Getting into a pot heads up with him is basically the ideal scenario. His SPR is around 0.6, so I think there's only one move, which is go all in. I'm hoping he picked up anything at all, as his calling range is going to be any pair, any draw. Unfortunately, he folds. This hand, I pick up king queen at the cutoff. This is the exact same hand and suit as I had earlier. The low jack opens to $20, and the action is on me. This time, against the late position open, I decide to 3-bet in position. I make it $80. Everyone folds back to the low jack. I'm mostly hoping to take this down pre-flop, blocking kings, queens, and ace king. That is not what happens though, as the villain 4-bets to $220. My pre-flop play didn't work, so not looking to put more money in with a questionable hand, even with position, I let this one go. This hand, I pick up Queen 6 of spades. The low jack opens to $15. I decide to cold call this one, a bit loose. The blinds also join in. It's four-way into a flop of Queen Ace 5 rainbow. Everyone checks. The turn is a 7 of diamonds. All the villains check to me. I think I have a hand here that could be good at showdown. Ace X is not likely checking twice on this board. Checking back and navigating to showdown is fine, but there are some draws out there. If I do bet, it would be for protection and to fold out something slightly better like Queen King or Queen Jack. So I decide to go for an overbet and make it $75. And everyone folds. This hand, I pick up Ace Jack of diamonds at under the gun. I open to $15. The middle position, the loose cannon, 3 bets to $30. Everyone folds and I call. It's heads up into a flop of Jack 7-4 with 2 hearts. Awesome flop hitting top pair. I start with a check. The villain C bets for $30. I call. The turn is a king. I check again. The villain checks back. The river is a queen. Had a great start, but not the best run out in the end. I only have third pair now, so not much thin value to go for. I just check. The villain checks back. We table our hands, and I lose this one to Queen 10. Well played, sir. This hand, I pick up Jack 9 of clubs on the button. Under the gun +1 opens to $15. The action folds to me. I decide to play this one in position as the aggressor. I 3-bet to $50. Everyone folds except for the initial raiser, who calls. It's heads up into a flop of Queen 10-7 rainbow with 1 club. The villain checks. Really good flop for my hand, hitting an open-ender as well as backdoor flush draw. Good board to at least double barrel here. So I start with a C-bet of $40. The villain calls. The turn is a 3, essentially a brick. The villain checks again. I didn't hit my straight or pick up the extra equity I was looking for. So checking back for a free card is fine, I think. But I decide to go for the more aggressive route and basically rep the top of my range. Aces, kings, queens. I size up and bet $200. The villain thinks for a bit and folds. My main villain in this hand is a fellow named Michael, someone I met that day. He is very fun to play with. He later tells me that he watches my vlog, so just a special shout out to him. Thank you for the support, Michael. Anyways, this hand, I pick up King Jack in the middle position. I open to $20. The hijack calls. Michael in the small blind also calls. It's 3-way into a flop of King 7 Queen rainbow. Michael checks. Awesome flop, hitting top pair. I C-bet for $25, targeting value from Queen X. The hijack, the loose cannon, calls. Michael also calls. The turn is 8 of hearts. Michael checks to me again. This card brings in a hard flush draw, which I unblock. I think my hand is still in the lead here. With this board, I likely have the best 1-pair hand, eliminating Ace-King from the ranges, as there's no 3-bet pre-flop. I'm likely against Queen X or weaker King X. If there was a stronger hand, I think there would have been a raise on the flop. Also, with the loose cannon in there, he can literally have anything. I decide that I can keep betting for value. I bet $80, mainly targeting Queen X and all draws. The hijack folds. Michael calls again. At this point, having position and the betting lead is very good. I will likely be in control at the end to go to showdown or possibly go for thin value. The river is an ace. Michael now bets out a pot-sized bet of $300. I think for a bit, this is a horrible river card. I no longer have top pair. As far as front door draws go, 10 jack for the open ender is the most obvious one that got there, even though I have a jack blocker. I'm not sure sets would play this way, but ace queen is another possible holding for this line. Basically, I'm not putting him on a bluff, and I don't see any value hands that I beat. I decide to let this one go.
Good one.
6-7.
Michael announces for the vlog and is nice enough to show me his hand. He reveals 6-7, which is bottom pair for a pure bluff. I get owned this hand. Well played, Michael. This hand, I pick up ace-7 of clubs on the button. Everyone folds to me and I open to $15. Both of the blinds call. It's three-way into a flop of queen 7-6 rainbow with one club. The small blind checks. The big blind bets out $25. I have second pair, best kicker, and backdoor nut flush draw. So not going anywhere quite yet in position. I call. The small blind also calls. The turn is another queen. Both villains now check to me. Actually an excellent turn card because it's less likely either villain has queen X, especially when they both check the turn. But I think it's still hard to say whether I'm good here multi-way. There are some draws out there, but someone holding an overpair to the 7 still makes sense. Trapping with a queen is a slight possibility as well. I decide to check back and assess. The river is a brick. Very interesting. Immediately as I see that card, the river brick, I'm thinking to myself, if I can value bet if it gets checked to me, I know I would go for it in a heads-up situation, but multi-way changes things. However, the small blind, being first to act, decides to muck his hand. So we're now heads up. The big blind, the remaining villain, does indeed check to me. I now go for the value bet. I make it $75, targeting 7x, some weaker pocket pairs, basically a bluff catching hand that might read me as having ace-king taking a jab. After tanking a bit, he finds a call. I table my hand, and the villain says, good kicker, and mucks. This is the last interesting hand as the table starts to break. And now, time to report on the results. I shared 3 sessions with you guys this episode, and my first session was 1-3. Give me 1 sec while this loads up. Okay, so 1-3. I bought in for $700 and I cashed out with $430. So that's a loss of $270. Second session was the super short 2-5 session. I bought in for $1,500 and I cashed out with $1,529. So that's a profit of $29. Third session, also 2-5. I bought in for $1,500 and I cashed out with $1,613. So that's a profit of $113. And that is it for this episode. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy my videos. And I hope you guys look forward to the next.